Today's story is not a fairy tale. This story is about a thin mattress laid on the cold ground, where waiting is more awake than sleep. It begins with a name, Yoshi Shiratori, and moves through every question hidden behind that name. Can a human really be so stubborn that no prison in the world can hold him? But today, we won't reveal the secret. We will walk the path, step by step, breath by breath, as if the story itself is showing the way. I remember that morning in Aomori, when even the sunlight felt warm in the cold. In that Aomori, in 1907, Yoshi was born. His father passed away early, and the silence that settled in the house made the child grow up quickly. Young Yoshi understood very early that in this world, having rough hands to earn bread is also a skill. He helped at a tofu shop. White steam rose, and the jelly-like layers glimmered on the tip of the knife. A day full of work and dreams suppressed under fatigue at night. Then he looked toward the sea. He worked with fishermen heading toward the cold winds of Russia, handling crabs, salt, sweat, and the sound of waves, all beyond his years. As work changed and fate didn't lend a hand, sometimes his stubbornness led him to the wrong turn. But at every turn, the intent wasn't crime. Sometimes he was only searching for a way. Right or wrong, that decision comes later. Yoshi settled down and his daughter's sparkling eyes kept him on the straight path. But when the cold wind blew through life's window, the flame of the stove trembled. Small mistakes, bad company, and fate's crooked ways kept coming together. One silent night, the sound of police boots echoed in the streets of Aomori. The grip tightened, and a name was entered on paper. Yoshi Shiratori was arrested. He faced 2 charges, robbery and murder. Yoshi admitted the robbery but denied the murder. The court listened, but the verdict was strict. He received life imprisonment. The father who used to say goodnight to his daughter every night, now had to learn to ask permission to utter the same words behind iron bars. In Aomori prison, the rules were not only on the walls, they reached into every daily breath. Wake up at a set time, stand in line, bow your head and endure the watchful eyes of guards. His cell had little space, plenty of silence, a cold floor, damp walls and light as if the sun itself were locked away. On the first day he understood who was in charge. "What is the prisoner number?" they asked. A person, his words and his story slowly became just a number. The first day, the first confrontation. A guard said in a harsh voice, "This is not the time to sleep. It's time to rise." Another handed him a tray, eyes full of command. Yoshi lowered his head and took the tray. Food filled the stomach, but if dignity is wounded, even bread descends slowly. He returned to his cell, sat on the rough mattress, and for the first time realized that walls are not only bricks and plaster, they are eyes too, watching every move. Every breath counts. That night, lying on his mattress, he looked at the ceiling where there was no sky. He closed his eyes and remembered his daughter's face, half smile, half asleep. His heart whispered softly, "I will return." Then he slowed his breathing, long and steady like burning wood in snow. He didn't make a plan inside yet. He wanted to awaken a belief. Escape was not just escape. It was a statement that a man can stand for his dignity, no matter how high the wall. By the end of the first day, he decided not to argue with anyone, not to challenge anyone. He would just listen. Voices, steps, the jingling of keys, the echoes in the corridors. He learned that in prison, silence speaks louder than noise. Any pause of a guard, the rotation of a key, the direction of a call, everything speaks. If a person learns to listen, and he listened, very carefully. Night deepened. The guards' movements shifted slightly, as if bodies and eyes also grow tired. This was no plan, just a perception. Every system has humans, and every human has a small overlooked spot. He touched the sheet on his bed. The rough fabric reminded him of the softness of home sheets. He hid that memory like a talisman, warming a hurting heart. Most importantly, he spoke truthfully to himself. If you are innocent, escaping is not a crime. But he also knew that the world wouldn't understand this sentence easily. That's why he had to escape carefully, ensuring no harm to anyone, no blood, no wounds. This battle was between him and the bars. No third person should appear. The last line of the first day was written deep inside him. Now he must escape. How? Patience will reveal today. He closed his eyes, no noise, no claim, just a silent vow. The world beyond the bars was far, but the name was alive, Yoshi Shiratori, a name that never yields. By day, rules rule, lines, counts, trays and orders. At night rules do not change, but human fatigue shifts slightly. Between guard changes, a thin crack seems to form, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes a little more, sometimes none at all. Night after night, Yoshi listened to that invisible clock, steps echoing in corridors, the creak of the stair on the turn. These all formed an unspoken equation. He felt that if not now, then never, but no haste, just waiting for the right time. That night, clouds hung in the sky. The air near the window was heavy and suffocating. Even the guard's steps carried weight, as if the threat of rain rested on everyone's shoulders. Yoshi touched his bed. The rough fabric reminded him of home. He slowly turned, pulling the sheet so that its folds resembled a sleeping body. He arranged the pillow and the lumps, so that at first glance, anyone would think he was asleep. But the real test was not outside. It was within. Fear's calmest face whispers from inside. If caught, Yoshi did not ignore that whisper. He listened, understood, and quietly said, "If truth is with me, effort is mine too." This mantra beat with his heartbeat. One watch passed, then another, until he heard a faint 15-minute window in the night where the decision had to be made. Yoshi closed his eyes, drew a long breath in, and released it just as long. Time passed over his cheeks like cold wind. He rose silently, without hurry or sound. His soles felt the cold ground. In that cold, he heard the first promise of free air. Reaching the cell door felt like a small journey. Every step measured, every shadow recognized. He glanced once at the sleeping man he left behind, as if leaving a second self there. In that moment, he realized that escape begins in the mind. Walls follow later, but night has its own rule. The world may be strict, but human stubbornness can be stricter. His steps echoed in emptiness. That emptiness became his companion. By the stairs, moisture on the wall bore a faint trace of his touch. This was not a glorious journey, but a man trying to save his own breath. He moved forward, another door then another. Through every obstacle the same cold air, now slightly less cold, met him. The path was hard, but it was a path. He paused at times to listen, a cough somewhere, a tray set down, a key turning slowly. He matched his pace with the cracks in those sounds. No haste, no show, just patience that sweats even in the cold. Time no longer passed in seconds, but in breaths. And then he reached open air. A place where the stench of prison lessened and walls seemed to fall silent. Cold night air brushed his face. For a brief moment, the big sky appeared through the clouds, then disappeared again. He did not celebrate, only realized he was halfway there. He moved carefully. The outside world was not just outside. For the first time he felt something opening inside him too. Escape is not only from walls, but also from habits. One habit was looking back in fear. He stopped himself from looking back. Ahead was a narrow, dark alley. The air was damp. Hope trembled lightly inside. He heard distant footsteps, measured them and thought, just a few more calm breaths. Then he moved as if a man had recognized the path to reclaim his dignity. Near the outer edge of the prison, he began to hear the city stirring, dogs barking, a distant bicycle bell, faint running water. He matched his steps to this music. Not too fast, not too slow. He was outside, but outside brought new troubles, hunger, cold, questions hidden in every face. On the first night he hid in a desolate corner. Cold seeped to his bones. Fingers first went numb, then began to sting. His breath rose in white clouds, saying, "You are alive." He realized it was not time to celebrate, just to fight for survival. Looking at the sky, the moon hid behind black clouds, shivering from the cold. By morning, hunger showed its strength. The stomach twisted silently. Wandering the city streets was risky, but sometimes risk feels small in front of the body's needs. He saw a glimpse of the Red Cross, and hospital medicine, bandages, maybe a bit of relief. From afar he observed people coming in and out, doors opening briefly, nurses whispering. He watched for a long time like a thirsty man staring at water, but measuring the depth before jumping into a lake. A moment came when he thought, just a little bandage, a little ointment, then I will go. His body's needs slightly veiled his mind's vigilance. He moved inside. The corridor smelled of medicine, clean, sharp, penetrating. He peered into a room with bottles, boxes and rolls of bandages. At that moment, footsteps approached from behind. Eyes met those of a nurse. Her gaze held surprise, then understanding as she thought nothing further. She called out. Her voice carried weight, bouncing off the walls multiple times. Stop. Not one, not two, but many footsteps followed that word. Yoshi measured the path. Doors, turns, stairs, all in between. Fear whispered, "Run." But stepping out of the room, a shadow emerged at the other end of the corridor. Behind a white coat, serious eyes and then security. The routes were blocked, coming out of the hospital. But memories of old pain returned. The handcuffs, the cold seat of the police car, the city running behind the glass window, and the shapes of crows perched on wires in between. No sirens, but a slow inner noise was running. 3 days. Only 3 days. The first breath of freedom hadn't even fully left his lungs when the law's grip pulled him back again. Omori Prison this time welcomed him not with silence, but with harshness. When the vehicle stopped, the wind showed its face, biting, bitter and cold. Like a judgment, the gate opened, and eyes met behind the iron bars. Guards, who first see a man as a criminal and then as a human. Papers signed and stamped, and Yoshi entered the boundary where even time becomes a watcher. On the way to the cell he noticed the walls, damp, smooth, unforgiving. The walls were made of bricks, but carried the memory of an old cruel season that numbed the fingers to the touch. The cell chosen for him was barely the distance between a man and his shadow, so small that standing, sitting and sleeping were the only movements allowed. The floor was cold, like the edge of a deserted river. The walls were so smooth that a slipping palm could lose its dignity, and at the top, near the ceiling, a window, a small piece of sky seemed almost impossible to reach. Yet dreams often seek challenge. 24 hours, this was the rule, not punishment. A chain bound with an iron strip measured every move and set the limits. When walking, there was a sound. When sitting, even while sleeping, cold iron fingers rested on the wrist. Every day, like a craftsman, the locks and chains were checked. Every night it was ensured that the prisoner's body was bound within iron limits. At mealtime the bowl was handed over. The distance between man and animal was sometimes shown only in the sound of utensils. It was exactly the same here. The real work of psychological control began at night. A thin sheet laid on the floor, from which cold rose as if someone had turned ice into smoke. It stiffened the back, froze the legs and deposited a layer of frost on the mind. Humiliation did not come in words. It came in the routine: rise, sit, extend hands, eat, stay silent. Within these 4 walls it created a dictionary where please and thank you were lost. Loneliness was so dense that sometimes even the sound of one's own steps became suspicious. Are these mine or someone else's? And in this harshness, a glimpse of humanity sometimes appeared. There was a guard in that prison. Stern, harsh-voiced, but with human fatigue in his eyes. His name was perhaps Kobayashi, or maybe something else. The name didn't matter. It was his behavior. Sometimes he would place the food slightly warmer, or if it was too cold, throw an extra thin sheet in a way that no one could notice. He didn't break the rules, but he knew how to create a small space for the soul within them. Yoshi saw a man in those eyes for the first time. There was no guard, only a human being, and in that subtle contradiction, he felt a warmth that would change the course of the story. Very faint, yet enough. Days turned into weeks. Nights were long and the window always high. Yoshi had observed that window not just from the first day, but from the first moment, as if the sky had placed the door far too high. But a human's eyes are as limitless as the body is constrained. He began counting, not measuring, but noting intervals of guard changes, steps returning, air temperature from the window, all a kind of mathematics of patience. He was learning this. He would sit with his back against the wall and imagine a path. No hurry, just a framework of vision. How high can I see if I stand? How long can I hold my fingers up? If my hands tire, can my mind sustain them? Every night a small exercise in the mind. The body was shackled, but imagination cannot be shackled. After a few nights, he told himself, "One day I will get out." This was not a declaration. It was the slow ripening of a resolve, like soup simmering gently, warming from within. In Akita prison that night and watch remained the same. Only the rain changed all the sounds. Footsteps were muffled, water splashed from the eaves. The wind whistled through the corridors, walls were wet. The smell of iron filled the air. This was the night Yoshi had been quietly waiting for. He opened his eyes. Clear voices in his mind said, "Not today, then never." He created the illusion of sleeping on the bed with sheets and pillow and rose. A shiver ran through his body from the cold floor, but he took it as a signal, not fear. The damp, hard wall became his guide. He blended into the shadows and moved forward. His palms found no grip but sought rhythm. The wall seemed to speak. Slowly, carefully, the outside rain hid his noise and he climbed upward, counting his breaths. More than the body, he kept his mind steady. When lightning flashed, he saw the window and bars, then darkness. In that darkness, he found his way, recognized limits, and decided, "Tonight, I write the story, not technology." Do not drown, hold the direction. Rain-soaked edges helped him. He endured wrist stings, straightened fingers and shoulders, and moved inch by inch, no noise, no hurry. Up above, it was not just a path, it was a lesson, responsibility, dignity, and reaching the small light in the distance. A soft moment came. He put his face out of the window. Rain soaked his head, and through the misty city roofs, he saw a distant tree. He paused, then took a deep, cold, freedom-filled breath. Below in the cell, silence, the illusion of sleeping on the bed, handcuffs on the floor. Above him he remained completely still and edged outward. Stepping on the roof, water splashed. He did not celebrate. True moments remain quiet. With the black sky and distant lightning, he did not run. He moved measuredly, to the rhythm of his breaths. His fingers were wet. The grip was steady. Only one thought remained. No harm to anyone. I just need the path. Somewhere below, a door thudded shut. Then footsteps merged into the rain. He slowed further. He knew the hero of this night was not noise, but his patience. In the blackest hour he saw the boundary line, the city beyond it, and the unknown morning ahead. He told his heart, just a little more. By morning, when the guard looked through the window, only wrinkles remained on the bed, and cold, wet handcuffs lay on the floor. The walls said nothing. Their dampness conveyed only this. Nature drew the veil, and a human quietly slipped away. The thin layer of frost bent in the morning sun, but the chill of night lingered in the bones all day. Days after leaving Akita, Yoshi Shiratori learned this. Even if freedom is won, the body and stomach collect their daily due. Forest paths, moss-covered rocks, raindrops hanging from branches, all together chart the path, placing new fears at every turn. Hide by day, move slowly at night, satisfy hunger with water, fool the cold with the rubbing of palms. This was the reality of the days on the run. Plain, ruthless, and absolute truth. Hunger speaks. First it pleads, then it threatens, and finally drives a man to any door. Yoshi persuaded himself, not now, just a little further. Another hiding place. But hiding places exist in the human world, where fires burn, steam rises from utensils, and a child's laughter rebounds off the walls. For many nights, the steam of bread stuck to his dry lips like a dream. The cold had numbed his fingers, and loneliness had become like a fifth limb of the body. During these days, one name kept emerging in his mind, Kobayashi. Amid the harsh walls of Akita, that one face occasionally showed a faint light of humanity. Bound by rules, he occasionally threw an extra sheet, a thin line of warm voice. Yoshi did not hate the word help. He feared only the thin line between mercy and humiliation. But hunger and cold made him step beyond that line. One evening, when the sky scattered clouds like fireflies, he reached a small alley at the edge of the city, where yellow light spilled from a window, and rain tapped a slow rhythm on the door. He knocked, lightly, like a friend hoping for recognition. Footsteps came from inside. Then the bolt clicked, and the door opened halfway. Kobayashi was there in an ordinary sweater, tired and surprised eyes together. For a moment, they looked at each other as if the prison walls had come along to this door. Kobayashi's first words were slow. The first words between him and Yoshi were a whisper, like water. He did not open the door fully. He let only the warm air inside. In that warm air was the soft smell of bread. "Come in," he said. These two words were not like a court order. They were an invitation to a home, where there is warmth, a chair and concern for each other instead of orders. Yoshi entered, with hesitation, gratitude and a bit of shame. Hunger had broken some layers of his dignity, but in his eyes a line still remained. A bowl on the table slowly released steam. Without questions, without a line on the forehead, Kobayashi slid the bread forward. "Eat." Yoshi took the first bite as if crossing an icy crack to sit by fire. When it passed his throat, the man inside revealed his face for the first time. "Thank you." A small word, but it contained the dust, cold and loneliness of the days on the run. When the glass of water came to his hand, he felt the old warmth of palms return. For a few moments, just right, after a few minutes of silence, the inner voice opened the door on its own. Kobayashi did not ask. He only gave the right to be heard. Yoshi began to speak, slowly, in broken and joining sentences. "I did not wish to run," he said, "but what happened inside was not punishment or torture. Every day a part of dignity was peeled away. I admit theft, but not murder." And when the word "not" echoed back from the walls, a man eventually finds the crack. He spoke of prison nights, strict guards, cold floors, iron chains biting wrists, that window near the ceiling so close to the sky, and then he said firmly, "I did not harm anyone. I just wanted to be able to breathe. Just enough that while remembering my daughter's face, I felt that I was still human." Kobayashi's eyes were steady. No accusation, no contempt, just listening. Sometimes listening comes before justice. At the end of the conversation, Yoshi made a simple request. "If you can, pass my words to a higher place. Just enough that I am given a place where humane behavior exists. I do not want to escape. I will serve my sentence, but I need dignity." In this sentence lay the patience of a cold night. Kobayashi nodded. He did not make a direct promise because promising was not a rule, and breaking rules was beyond him. He said only, "First take a bath. I'll warm the food." Yoshi went to the bathroom. He saw his face in the mirror, pale from dirt, swollen under the eyes, lips cracked. When water touched his forehead, the storm inside him eased slightly. He rubbed his palms, splashed water on his face, and closed his eyes for a moment. "Perhaps tonight I can sleep without fear." Across the door, in the kitchen, the clatter of utensils echoed. A home's clatter, human and different from any sound of prison. At the same time, another sound arose in the drawing room. Very faint, yet decisive. The phone. Kobayashi picked up the receiver. The voice was low, words were few. Time revealed its true face. Justice does not flow only from emotion. It also flows through rules. He fulfilled his duty, as any citizen, any guard, any part of the system would. When Yoshi returned from the bathroom, he first heard the footsteps at the door. Then the familiar scent of iron in the cold air. The door opened, and the winter walls entered. At that moment, time slowed itself. Yoshi's eyes rested on Kobayashi. There was no shame, no victorious smile. There was only a person, a face trapped between duty and humanity. He did not avert his eyes. He chose to stand steady. Accepting that sometimes right can also sting is not easy. The handcuffs were again on his wrists. This time, in the warm air of the house, their cold touch told him that this chapter of his days on the run was ending here. Sitting in the police car, Yoshi told himself only this: trust was not wrong. Hope had chosen the wrong time. The night's dimness had fallen on the city streets. Rings of light stretched across the rear window like long streaks, like memories that are not easy to let go. Station, papers, signatures, and then the same bars. The story returned to prison, but this time the court came along too. In court, words like escape, arrest, breaking rules were weighed. Yoshi did not give a long speech. He simply said, "I did not commit murder. I ran to avoid bad behavior. If I had dignity, I would not have run." But why the court? What does it see and what was clear? Escape is a crime. Punishment and life imprisonment on top of life imprisonment. When the verdict was read, he did not bow his head. He held himself steady. The truth was not won today, but his courage had not faltered. Now he would be taken to another cold jail. People would call him a fugitive. But he considered himself a survivor, because he was saving his breath, his honor and his truth. Kobayashi's home remained behind. Its warmth and a lesson stayed with him. Between mercy and deceit, many times only duty stands, leaving a slight scratch on the heart on both sides. On the way, looking out the window, he decided, "I will not lose trust. I will hold it with hope and caution." This is not a vow of revenge. It is a lesson in living. Being human and being careful can walk together. When the car stopped at Abashari prison gates, the evening sun had faded. Stepping inside, the weight of silence was felt first. Here voices were low, orders distant, and eyes fixed. The sprawling compound, shadows of watchtowers, cold embedded in the wooden barracks, all directions in Abashari, led to supervision. This place was more a science of control than imprisonment. Chains were not just security. They were the language of the system. Thick, heavy, with complex locks. The pressure of metal on the wrist, after some time, numbs rather than hurts, reminding every movement's limit. Opening them is not at the prisoner's will. It depends on specialists called from outside with tools. Even when opened, it is only a brief pause for bathing, cleaning or treatment, not freedom. The routine is strict. In morning counts, names are not called, only numbers. Metal bowls, tasteless, cold food. Yet if food is the rule, food must be eaten. Holding a bowl in chains may be difficult, but courtesy is not a priority. The stomach comes first. The body is pushed into animal-like posture. Shoulders bend, elbows stay silent. Dignity must be hidden like a talisman. Still, inner warmth keeps whispering. You are who you say you are. Chains do not decide who you are. The cold room shrinks further at night. Windows are high. The sky is seen in halves. Walls are thick, floor hard, leaving no place for softness. Guards may be present or absent at every moment, just to remind you, you are being watched. Still, within this supervision a small empty space remains, where a man disciplines his own breath. Long, slow centuries passed. Days went by and every evening, the same result. If escape ever happened, it would not be for revenge. Not for prestige. Not for greed. The intent was only to protect one's truth and dignity. He wrote small rules for himself. Stay calm, do not err, do not show pride, harm no one, stick to your truth. Amid checks and tests, sometimes a guard would appear human, asking about well-being with his eyes. In snowy days when the sun peeked in, a faint smell of warmth rose from the veranda wood. In such moments, Yoshi became firm but fair. This moment would pass, but who he was would not. That clarity became his armor. No challenge, no surrender, just steadiness. In the longest hour of the night, when wind whistled through brick cracks, he whispered to himself, I will leave here too, not for revenge, not for prestige. That was still as clear. I did not murder. I admitted mistakes, but I did not abandon the truth. In respect, he moved each step carefully to prevent hurting anyone. Sometimes, specialists came and opened the chains with tools for a few minutes. The wrists felt lighter, the mind a chance to breathe. Then the chains returned, as if day had returned to night. But that brief pause left a lasting effect, like a warmed palm remaining warm in the cold for a while. In Abashari, there is no need to keep count of days, because here the weather keeps score. Snow falls, paths are covered, and the wind's direction tells how harsh the guard's pace will be today. Yoshi did not consider the weather an enemy. It was merely a controller. The real battle was within. Could he protect his truth from the cold? Could he protect his story from anger? Could he shield his next decision from causing someone pain? One evening, when the sky turned faintly blue, suddenly colorless like glass, he pressed against the wall, closed his eyes, and said in his heart, "If I ever find a way outside, I will choose it on my own feet, not on someone else's shoulder. If the wall ever lets me pass, I will not leave a new wound in the world in return. My victory will be only my breath, and my truth kept in the memory of my daughter." This oath may seem small, but in a world like Abashari, it is the hardest decision. Here it boils first inside a man. Revenge. Yoshi kept that boil away, in the cold air, behind the walls. What he chose for himself was not a hero's sword, but the dignity of a citizen. This dignity woke him every morning, put him to sleep every night, and kept him steady before every inspection. Yoshi Shiratori measured his days, not by the clock, but by his breaths. Every day a small victory, slightly more peace, slightly less anger, slightly better discipline. The chains said the same thing every day: "Stop here." And every day he replied, "I will stop, but not inside." The memory of the walls stayed with him. He knew every surface, every gate, every door had habits. Time either made them stronger or slightly loose. This story was not against a lock. Time was on his side. Because however harsh time may be, one day it bends before human patience. Months passed. Guards, checks, inspections, all continued. Yet within, a thread tightened a little more each day. Yoshi had set his own rules. No harm to anyone. No revenge, no haste, only dignity, patience, and waiting for the right moment. Slowly he realized that obstacles were not stones but sand, released not by hands but by time, and when obstacles loosened, no sound came, only the path became slightly clearer. Then came that season, when nights in the cities grew darker. Blackout, a wartime necessity. But in prison, this night brought a different meaning. Less light, more fatigue for the eyes. Guards were still human. The silence in the air was heavy, as if the sky had said to itself, "Today I will close my eyes." Even in the guard's steps, there was no fear, only the weight of exhaustion. Orders were still orders, but the night had softened their tone. That night Yoshi drew a line within himself. This was not a hasty decision, it was the result of months of meditation. He recalled every lesson he had taught himself. Slowly, gently, without noise, the body's limits were in place. The pain in his wrists, tension in shoulders, cold seeping between ribs. But the mind told the body, "You are only a vessel, I will write the story." Within the prison, the corridors had a map, not on paper but in his memory. The map was made of sounds, where the wood creaks, where the wind whistles more, where footsteps echo the longest. On that blackout night, the map emerged in dim light. He counted every breath as a unit. 3 breaths forward, 1 pause, 2 steps, then stop and listen. This was not running. Walking itself was not flowing. It was as if a shadow moved beneath the river of night. A narrow path appeared, narrow enough that his body doubted its own shape. Knees bumped, stretching between ribs. An old shoulder pain awakened. The rough wall argued with his skin. "Stop here." He answered softly, "I will stop when breath learns to survive." The stiffness in joints, the shivers in muscles, cold sweat on his brow, all formed a single word: limit. And the mind placed its hand on that word. Respect the limit. Converse with the limit. Breath could now make sound. If he panicked, he stopped it where the sound would form. Long, slow, measured breaths, near the throat, body weight distributed inch by inch, wrist, elbow, shoulder, rib, knee. A small compromise on each inch, slight pain but forward. The walls of the narrow path began testing him more than stopping him. He passed the test because he did not rush. He measured every inch, then moved forward. Even the blackout night outside was not entirely silent. A flute of wind from afar, a slow metallic clash, the faint tick of cracking ice. This tick reminded him ice makes sound too, and today that sound was on his side. The guard's movements changed. He stopped, listened, and then advanced only as far as his breath allowed. No rush. One wrong sound, one unnecessary scrape, and the whole story could end here. After a turn, another obstacle, narrower still. Here the body had to shrink in its own shape, Knees resisted. The damp cold floor pierced bones. He persuaded his knees, just a little further, warm air ahead. The shoulder's bone demanded account of its old fatigue. I won't bend that far, he said. Today I only want one last echo of pain. But the mind reassured. Do not become a sound. We are reaching. After several breaths, when the body endured its final stretch, the thin line of air ahead became tangible. Cold on his cheek, moisture on his eyelids, as if an invisible waterfall flowed before him. He stretched his hands forward. In the touch was the scent of the future. One more inch, then another, and then openness. Air was no longer a line but a small room, a room with the scent of the outside world, wet earth, damp wood and the faint fragrance of an unknown flower from afar. He did not stop, because the first rule of victory is, do not persuade yourself. He maintained the rhythm of his breaths, and shifted himself from that place toward the rest of the world. The bars left behind no longer made noise because the story had not left them capable of it. Ahead, snow dense, cold, merciless. He looked at the night sky, a blackout sky where stars could be counted if fingers were not numb. The first step on the roof or edge, the snow accepted him with a soft crunch. Under his shoes, a crackling sound as if drawing a new line on paper. He planted his feet firmly. Falling in snow meant cold penetrating within, and cold meant slow death. He paced his steps with rhythm. Slow, deep, measured. White smoke rose with every breath. Each breath formed a shape and dissolved in the air. He felt as if writing his presence in the air, and the air immediately erased. That was necessary to vanish, to avoid capture. He was learning to merge into nature, leaving the world of walls behind. Here, guards are absent. The wind patrols. Here, hunger asks, not search. He saw a line of dark trees in the distance, and moved toward. Trees block wind, stop sound, hide the path. His knees protested every step, but he promised them, we will find fire in the morning. Promises, like breaths, are visible in the cold, but need warmth to fulfill. The night was long. At intervals, he stopped to listen. A leaf trembled somewhere. Perhaps a small creature ran. Beneath the snow, a thin vein of water flowed. Tick, tick. He kept his distance from that sound. Getting wet invites death. Preserving body heat became law, stricter than before. He pressed his hands to his sides, hunched shoulders, covered his chest from the air, and set his steps to a rhythm that fatigue could keep pace with. Clouds moved across the sky again. A tiny star of the blackout night settled in his eye. He did not count it. The star had only come to say the work of darkness is nearly done. Far away, a faint dim signal of a settlement. Perhaps a dog barked. Perhaps a flicker in a window. He did not turn the path directly there, because haste could trap him. He made a slow curve through the trees, so his footprints would not form an obvious trail. The ground sloped as he climbed toward the mountain. He distributed weight evenly between heels and toes, so as not to slip. One slip, sharp needle of pain in the knee. He stopped immediately. He prevented the pain from becoming sound, then slowly rose. The mind instructed the body again. The real fight is to survive. Leaving the walls meant escape, but staying in the snow meant survival, and survival is a long story. At the night's end, when the wind loosened its pressure, he chose a spot among the trees where wind cut less, where the dry needles on the ground held less moisture. He leaned against a tree, drew his knees in, and shortened his breaths, as much as he could control in the cold. Eyes not closed, just half lowered. Fatigue wanted sleep, but he allowed only rest. This was not time for sleep. This was time to reach morning. From somewhere far, the wind gave news. The sky was lightening. He slowly rubbed his palms. A small flame of warmth he kindled. He did not smile. Even a smile could melt in warmth. Only a line formed in his mind. Bars behind, harsh nature ahead, and in between me. Now the story's name must be not escape, but survival. Meanwhile, rumors began. Someone said he had been seen in the northern forest. Someone added that laborers passing through mines had caught him giving bread. Someone said he was dead. Someone said he was living under a new name. Rumors first formed cracks, then stories, and slowly folklore. In village squares, late at night, when the last ember in the hearth remained, people quietly spoke of the man who outsmarted the walls. But folklore never tells the full story. It leaves empty spaces for listeners to fill. And here, myth is born. From the law's perspective, the question is simple. Is he alive? But the law is also run by humans. Tiring, wandering, sometimes conceited. Not every pursuit reaches its end. Search parties would set out, dots would appear on the map, and after some time, the dots would vanish. Footprints in the mountains do not last far. Snow falls and erases the story. Fatigue is no crime. He simply accepted that nature's geography is larger than the geography on paper. One evening, when clouds spread their shadow over the fields, he stopped at the edge of a field. The soil was damp, the scent of straw filled the air, and from afar came the laughter of children. One should not fear laughter, but the first rule of a man on the run is to hear laughter from a distance. He had just stepped onto a path in search of water, when suddenly two men appeared ahead. One held a stick, the other eyes full of suspicion. "Who?" The voice trembled with fear. Yoshi raised his hands. "Water, please." This answer was not of criminals, but of humans, yet fear had closed their ears. A sharp shout, then running footsteps, and a struggle along the field's edge. In this encounter he remembered one thing: no one gets hurt. In these small clashes, he learned a new lesson, that a person's greatest enemy is not always the one who pursues. Sometimes it is the one who fears. Fearful people lift stones quickly, and those running turn quickly, but with every turn, his breaths grew shorter. Fatigue set in, hunger roared, nights became long. He understood. Now his fight was not against walls, but against the weather. Not against a guard, but against his own breaking body. The war had ended. New laws were applied in the city. Old buildings became museums, and new ink marked the pages of history. Somewhere a new Japan was being written. But no one running from themselves is truly new. They are merely surviving. Yoshi kept his distance. In no team, in no assembly. He now mostly listened to voices from outside, and asked himself, how long? There was no precise answer. Yet inside him, one line remained clear: no one gets hurt. Gradually, his name became a game. Outside a temple, children would say he went that way. An elder would say no, he went toward the sea. A traveler claimed he saw him in an old mine shed. His name seemed like ashes scattered in the wind. Every hand blew it in a different direction. But ash has a property: it is proof of fire, not fire itself. The fire was still inside him, but it did not blaze. It held. Sometimes in the quietest moments of night, he spoke to himself. Am I truly alive, or merely trying to survive? These are two different things. To be alive and to survive. In the first state, a man dreams. In the second, he only wants to see morning. He explained to himself, one day, dreams will return. But today, that goal is enough. Reach morning, and reach it without causing harm. Another encounter near the mine, in an old structure at night. Some workers arrived, tired, silent, with bread packed in their own sacks. One of them noticed the shadow sitting behind a wall. Who? This time, the voice held less suspicion, more compassion. Yoshi held out an empty palm. The worker took half a loaf from his sack and gave it without question. No name asked, no place mentioned, just one human giving bread to another. In that moment, a small bridge formed over the gap between law and immorality, on which only silence passed. On the main streets, police checkpoints still kept records of his search. Reports were made, files circulated, and after a few days, dust from some new case fell on those papers. Is he alive? This question gradually became, does it still matter? But in the story, meaning is determined not by paper, but by the man's breath, still seeking his place among the trees. The post-war Japan lit its cities with new laws, new hopes and proclamations of a new world. And at the same time, a shadow moving along the edges preserved its oldest hope, that one day it would be heard as a human, not as a criminal. He knew this hope was also a struggle, and struggle does not always roar. Sometimes, very long silence suffices. At the end of the night, when the wind grew milder and humidity higher, he sat on a hill slope, seeing the distant twinkling of cities. He said to himself, the world has changed. Then after a while he added, but I still need to reach morning. That is the difference. The clock of history, and the clock of a man. The clock of history is set in closed rooms. The clock of a man is set by snow, hunger and heartbeats. And somewhere in the evening of a village, an elder told his grandson, "They say he crossed the bars 4 times. Now no one knows where he is." The grandson asked, "Grandfather, was he a hero?" The elder smiled. "The son makes the judgment between hero and criminal. But being human is decided often by hunger and cold." The grandson asked, "And what does a human do?" The elder looked toward the distant fields. "Tries to survive." Reaching every step meant keeping pace with a strict clock. Here, 24-hour surveillance was truly felt every moment. Small windows, thin cracks, and eyes fixed in every corner. The cell world was so small that inside and outside existed only air, gaze, and occasionally, a word passing. From morning to night, everything ran on orders, and at count time, cold light through the window revealed only half of the face. The other half seemed hidden even from oneself. Yet within this strictness, small pockets of humanity found space. A guard lowered his voice while putting down dishes. Another paused before closing a window, as if asking, "All right?" Rules were not broken. A thin, silent respect existed on both sides. One side the uniform, the other the bars. Days passed, doors, windows, nightly counts, all the same. And on a very ordinary night, time blinked as if briefly. The guard did not relax, only the man grew tired. A half-second pause in the rhythm of surveillance, and I, who had measured every sound for months, took a step in that silence. No noise, no how, just enough that listening to the softest whisper, I reached the outside air, where cold and freedom breathed together. Outside, the night of snow, the snowy floor, the lock of the wind, distant yellow lights. I set my pace to the rhythm of the wind, neither too fast to make noise, nor too slow to catch the cold. At every turn, the same sentence in my mind: no one gets hurt. Fatigue was the final test. In a narrow alley between 2 buildings, a wet bench appeared. I sat, took a cigarette from my pocket. The smoke circle quickly dissolved in the cold air. Smoke does not stand before the truth. At that moment, footsteps approached. 2 shadows stopped at the mouth of the alley, and a third voice said, I only left the last puff of the cigarette into the air. Then, without resistance, I extended my hands, for resistance often diminishes the truth. Ahead, station papers, signatures, and then the court. This time too there was a sentence, but with a human tone in the words, wrong but strict. Yet the glimpse of intent was recognized. On the way back, looking through the window at the city receding bench, alley lights, dimmed, he simply said in his mind, the fourth escape is not proof, it was the conclusion of fatigue. And in the end, that same silent respect, 2 guards bound by rules, and a man who within the rules, never lost the rhythm of being human. After the echo of the court, the world shrank again. 4 walls, a bed, cold air, and inside me, a new sentence settled. Not every story ends in court. It is decided by humans. Years passed, serving the sentence. One day the door opened. Release for good conduct. Outside, no noise, no statement, only a decided mind. Now the fight was not with walls, but with the noise within. He lived the outside life simply, small tasks, normal routine, far from the burden of a name. Better to be seen as a calm man than as a notorious fugitive. Gradually his story reached books, articles, documentaries, and museums. People began thinking not just how he escaped, but why he escaped. Dignity and justice, and a father's responsibility. The clear lesson of this story: the system needs rules, but within the rules, humans must also survive. When the system makes space for dignity, conflicts lessen. Escape was wrong, that statement stands, but the intent was not always violence. Recognizing this difference is the beginning of reform. For the audience, one simple truth: remember experience, not technique, not cleverness, but patience. Not oaths of revenge, but a pledge of dignity. Institutions may be strong, but inner humanity must not weaken.